All right, welcome to my Floral Pumpkin live stitch along. I'm not sure how many people will be able to join me during the day, but this will be available for replay. So hopefully you can watch it later on Instagram or on YouTube. So this is the booklet that comes with the pattern. And there's a traceable pattern, and then this is what comes inside. So you've got a heat erasing pen, you've got the needles, so you can see there's one with a large eye and then a smaller eye, and then our threads. I love these colors together. And you'll have extra left over at the end, so you can use them for other projects or practicing. And then the fabric, which is a natural unbleached muslin. I put 2 layers in each pack because I prefer to stitch through 2 layers. So as we go along, if you have questions, if you have questions or you're stitching along with me today, and you have questions while I'm live, let me know. But in the pack, I usually put a chenille needle and an embroidery needle. That's not super important for people to remember, but in case you're curious, that's the details. So we have the embroidery needle is a size 5, and it has a little bit smaller eye, but it's not too difficult to thread, which is why I like this one. And then, and I usually put that in all my kits. And then this is a chenille needle, and they are sharp point, but have a large eye. So if you're using multiple strands of thread, or when we get to the woven wheels, which use all 6 strands of our thread, this will be much easier to thread the needle. So, and then we've got, I had some people that ordered the beechwood hoop. If you got a beechwood hoop kit, I was looking around to see if I have the oval one here, and I don't, but the beechwood hoop is a little bit wider on the edges, and so I printed the traceable pattern just a little bit larger for the beechwood hoops. That means you'll have a little bit extra to stitch with the pumpkin, but I wanted to make sure it fit that hoop nicely. So if you ordered the beechwood hoop, yours might take a little bit longer. No, I will be stitching it. Hopefully we'll get to some of the stitching, but first we're going to start out with just, I wanted to show the supplies. I'm going to show you tracing. I've mostly traced mine already. So if you are tuning in and you're like, oh, I don't have time to get all the tracing done, that's okay. You can watch it late. You can watch more of the stitching later today if you didn't get a chance to get your tracing done. So this is the traceable pattern. And then with the flex hoops, I definitely wanted to show this. If you ordered a kit with a flex hoop, the really cool thing about these flex hoops is, now they are a little tight. You have to be careful not to pinch your fingers. But basically this is a faux wood. It's a plastic like rubber. When you take it out, the shape is dependent on the inner hoop. When you take it out, it really can become any shape. And the really cool thing about this is you saw it was a vertical oval because it was in like this. But if you stick the inner hoop like this in, and then you kind of stretch that outer hoop, it'll snap over the inner hoop, and now you have a horizontal oval. So for this pattern, I obviously used the horizontal oval. So that's a neat little trick with these flex hoops. You're not dependent. When I bought the beechwood ovals, I got 2 different ones before I was happy with the size. And so you're kind of stuck with whether the screw is on the top or on the side. So anyway, okay, so you're gonna take one piece to start out. And I am going to show like how to thread your needle and tie your knots, because I know that there's some people starting out this pattern as beginners. So I'm going to show all of that too. So when you take your fabric, you're going to lay it over, separate your hoops, lay it over the inner hoop, just one of the pieces. And then, I know this is going to feel tricky at first, but you're going to put like one of the edges in here. And then just kind of roll the hoop down over the inner hoop. And then you're going to pull your fabric around. And you want it to be tight. You want to be able to hear a sound like a drum. So you'll start out with your fabric and your hoop, and let me lift you up here to the window. Now, you're not going to have to watch me trace all of this because I tried to prep mine ahead of time for the sake of time. But please ignore the Amazon packages you might see on my doorstep. I'm one of those people that has been getting Amazon packages that I didn't order, so I'm trying to get that resolved. Anyway, what I like to do is I like to take a little piece of tape and tape this on the window. I was hoping this would be a really sunny day, but I guess for the sake of this example, you can tell that it is not here. So this is my favorite transfer method. You can take an iPad or any kind of like digital device like that and create like a white screen. Like if you were going to write a document or type a document or something, have a white screen. You can put it on guided access if you have an iPad so that it doesn't change screens or whatever. But what I like to do is you can put this on top of a lighted screen if you have a light pad or an iPad, but I like to just tape it to a window. So then I take my hoop and you take the front side and put that down so that you're right against the window. And you can see that I already traced a lot of my pattern. So when I press it against there, I can see where my lines match up. So if you don't get a chance to do this right now, that's okay. For future videos, I didn't want to just do a prep video today. I wanted to get into the stitching. So that's why I went ahead and did mine ahead of time. So today you might not be stitching much along with me if you didn't do this already, but that's okay. You can watch this later if you need to. And so then I just take my heat erasing pen and I try not to go over the lines more than once until I pull it away from the window. Then you can darken any spots that you need to. But I try to just go over it once so it's smooth. And sometimes you gotta take a break because your arms get tired. But this is honestly my favorite method. I think the natural light helps a lot. And here I am going over lines when I told you not to. Anyway, you'll see why in a second. So, yeah, the nice thing is you don't have to have any special equipment for this. You don't have to have an iPad. You can literally just put it on a window and trace. And this whole thing, I just traced on my window. I just did most of it ahead of time. So that is my favorite transfer method. And then I'll show you what to do now, because now our pattern is, as you can see, it's on the wrong side. So we're going to have to switch it and flip it back over, but we're also going to be adding a piece of fabric. So let me bring you back to, oh, here comes the sun. Do. I was really hoping this would be a nice sunny morning for me stitching this. And it's finally coming out. So I'm going to pop this back out of the hoop because it's backwards right now. This was just an example, but this is my second piece of fabric. So set that aside. Okay, so now you're going to place your inner hoop down again. and your blank piece of fabric over it. And then the one that you just traced. And we're going to try to smooth this out and center it as best as we can over top of the inner hoop. The reason I like to add another piece of fabric is because when we're stitching, you can kind of see my hand behind that. It's not very thick fabric, and some fabrics, if it's more of a woven fabric that has like it's not as tight, you might not be able to see through it, but sometimes that woven material stretches. The other thing is, like in this case, it's kind of thin. I prefer to stitch through 2 pieces of muslin fabric. Muslin is very affordable. It's an easy fabric to get. And when you stitch through 2 layers, there's less stretching, so there's less distortion when you're doing your stitches. We're going to snap this down over top. So I hook it in one side. And it just creates more stability, less transparency of the fabric. Now we're going to stretch it again. You want to be careful with your stretching. We don't want to, I don't think it'll distort the image that we traced, but we just want to be careful there. Make sure all your sides came out. The flex hoops, if you haven't used them before, they can take a little getting used to. Because it doesn't have the screw at the top, you can't tighten them as much as I would sometimes prefer. If this drives you crazy with the flex hoop, you can just use these for display only when you're finished, and you can work on it in a round hoop. So, oh, this actually fits nicely. This is a 6-inch round hoop. It also fits nicely in there, but I just liked the look of it in the oval. So, there's our hoop prepped. And I'm going to take a pair of scissors and cut off some of this extra, and you might want to do this too, because especially when you're a beginner and you're not used to the feel of the back of the fabric, sometimes these corners can get stuck behind and get stuck in your stitches, and we don't want that to happen. So this doesn't have to look pretty, you just want to leave at least 1 inch. Just out of curiosity, is there anyone on here that is doing this stitch along currently? Now I'm going to put it in my stand. You do not have to have a stand, but trust me, you want me to have a stand while I'm filming, so it's not too, so you don't get seasick. And I'll tighten it up here. Okay. So here we are. And now I'm going to take a needle and my threads. I had, oh, here they are, a box of threads. And I'm grabbing my pattern too because I want to make sure that I tell you the right amount of strands for things. So on the instructions, oh, you're crocheting a scarf. That's fun. Well, thanks for joining me. It's fun to have people engage and, comment. So, yeah, it's kind of fun. I've seen other people do lives where they've had people that are just working on a different project while they're on the live. And that's fun too. So I'm going to I have mine wrapped on bobbins, but if you have the skeins, you always want to pull from the number side. So the number side should have a loose end, and this is a hack that you want to learn early on. If you pull from the number end, it's less likely to knot. If you pull from the other end, because there's usually a loose end on both sides, it will get knotted into this big ball. So I'm going to cut about an 18-inch length of the thread. And now we're going to separate our threads because you can create a very smooth satin stitch. That's what we're starting with on the pumpkin. You can create a very smooth satin stitch if you use 3 strands or less. I do not advise using all 6. You can try it, but you're going to see the individual stitches more. What I'm going for with the satin stitch is a satin look. Really nice and shiny like this and smooth. So you can just tap the end of it or start to unroll the threads, and I take it 3 and 3, find where it naturally divides, and then I just kind of grab it with my one hand and pull the threads down through with my other hand until I get to the end. Just loosely let it unfurl, and then I'm stuck with my 3 here. I wet the end of it by pinching it between my lip and my teeth. Okay, I do get it wet with my mouth. Most people don't really talk about that in the videos, but that is an age-old way to wet the ends of your thread and kind of pinch it between your teeth so you end up with a nice flat piece of thread, and they stick together when they're wet. So then you just put it through the eye of the needle. And if you have ends that are not even, then just take your scissors and give it a little snip so all your ends are even. That'll make it much easier to thread your needle. So once we've got it threaded, then you're going to take the bottom and we're going to knot it. So how I do a knot is I wrap it around my finger like this, make an X, and then I roll it off of my finger. I'm still pinching it. And then I bring my middle finger around, pinch that little spot, and pull. And it makes a little knot. So, pretty simple. Now, I'm going to show you another method in case that feels hard to you. So, the other method you can use is to point the end towards your needle. Like, I hope I'm going to get this in the first try. We'll see. I don't usually use this method, but you can twist this around your needle and then pinch the part you twisted and pull your needle through, and that also creates a knot, and that's called a quilter's knot. Now the sun's going to come out, and it's going to be too bright. Okay, there we go. I think that's better. Hi, Tara. So, we've threaded the needle. We've got the knot on the end. And you don't have to do this right now. You can come back and watch this later. One of the things that's tricky with the flex hoops is to keep your fabric tight the whole time. And so every once in a while, you might want to just give your fabric a tug around the edges to make sure that it's staying nice and tight like a drum. Now, when I do a satin stitch, you can take your pen. This is a good trick, especially if you're a beginner, but I even do it sometimes just for myself. And make some straight lines across the whole way down. These are going to be our guidelines, and it's just going to help us make sure that we're keeping things nice and even. Now, as we go to the sides, if you want to think about when you're looking at something straight on, like a pumpkin, if it had lines on it, which it doesn't exactly, but if you're looking at something straight on, think about it as like a house maybe, or I'm trying to think of something round, a silo maybe. So if you have a silo that's like ribbed, the lines go like towards an angle as you go back if you're looking at it straight on. So we're going to do that here. So I like to, you don't have to do this, but if you want it to have more depth, you want to angle these as you go back. Just a little bit. So I like to put in the guidelines. It just helps to keep you. Now, you can do those later if it muddies it up too much for you, but hello. So I'm going to start with the middle here, and this is called a satin stitch. We're using 3 strands of the 976, and I like to start at the widest point of whatever shape I'm working on. So in this case, I'm going to start right here in the middle of the pumpkin. And this live will be saved later on Instagram, and I will also upload it to YouTube. So we come up till you pull it the whole way through and feel the knot, stop it. And then you go down in the opposite side. Now we're going to come up as close as we can. As close as you can to your previous stitch. Start on the same side, go across. And then using just that very point of your needle, go as close as you can back down on the other side. And so this is where embroidery becomes like coloring. Each time you come up, you want to come up as close as you can to that previous stitch. It might look like it's crowding it. That's okay. And then back down on the other side. And so you're just kind of coloring it in one stitch at a time. I start in the middle at the widest point. That just makes it so that if you start at the top, sometimes you can get a little off. By the time you get to the middle, it might be crooked. So that's why I like to start right in the middle and then work our way out. So you know that you are keeping things nice and straight. I love satin stitch. I'm curious for those of you who are on, if you've stitched before, how do you feel about satin stitch? I love it. When I was growing up, I felt like, and you might have heard me say this before, but we only really outlined things with embroidery, and I never really knew that you could like color things in. Of course, it takes a lot more time, but I just didn't even know that was like a possibility. And so then when I discovered satin stitch as an adult, I was like, oh, I love this, because you can color things in and it just adds so much more depth and texture, and I love the look of a satin stitch. And so what people usually struggle with, you just got to make sure you keep the stitches very close together, as close as you can. Try to match up your edges as smoothly as you can. Each stitch stacked on top of the other. Yeah, I do really like this orange. Somebody said this orange is beautiful, and I am using 976 is this shade of orange. It is one of my favorites to use for pumpkins. It's not super bright. It's a little bit more earthy. I used one that was slightly brighter the other day for another project, and I used 921 for that one. But I really like the shade of this one. I like to do my pumpkins not super, super bright. So you just keep going until you get towards the end of your thread. And Now, you might have felt like I was doing this a little fast, so I'll explain something for beginners too. This tail hangs loose the whole time, and it's going to be getting shorter as you stitch. Now, the way I like to hold my needle so that to find my stitches each time, let me explain that to you. I usually hold my needle, let me flip this over. I usually hold my needle with my thumb and my middle finger. I guess I should have said this earlier, but this might help you. My thumb and my middle finger. And then I use my first finger here up at the top, and it kind of slides along the needle. So this is kind of pinching the bottom so that tail doesn't come out, if that makes sense. If you grip it in the middle, that tail's always going to be coming off, and you're going to be rethreading your needle all the time. If you pinch it at the bottom, it shouldn't come out, even when it gets short. And then I keep my first finger along the edge of the needle, and I use this as a guide to find my spot. So I kind of go along the kind of scratching along the bottom with my finger at the top to find the spot, and then I push it through where I need it to be. So in this case, like, here's my finger. See how you can guide it along with your needle. So if you come down this line, and then you use I'm using my first finger to kind of stop the needle when I get to the point that I need. So if you guide it and then stop, you can kind of poke it through a little bit, a couple times, just to see what the best spot is, and then push it through. I hope that helps if you are a beginner, because I think, I've been doing this so long that I don't really think about it. And so I slide it around and then poke it through at the right spot. So again, it's just, I'm going like this in the back as I guide it, and then when I get to the right spot, I kind of push it up. This will take a little time for you to kind of perfect that, but just take your time and keep your finger right there at the tip of the needle so you can slide it through wherever you want when you find the right spot. Oh yeah, I'll have to come check that out. Now, unfortunately, with the live, people can't see comments from the recording. So if I explain your comment, it's for the sake of people watching later, because they won't be able to see that later. Okay, so now I'm at the very end. I probably went a little bit further than maybe you should if you're just starting out, but when you get about 3 to 4 inches left of that tail, you want to stop, go down through for the last time, and then I'll show you how to do an ending knot. So it's going to look about the same on the back as it does in the front, and you're going to slide your needle under, just grab a couple stitches, slide it under, pull your needle through, and we're going to have this loop then. Now my tail is really short. I don't recommend going this short. But you're going to push your needle, the end of that needle, through the loop and pull it, and that will create a knot. Okay, I like to do that 2 times. In this case, I'm not going to do it twice because this isn't a shirt. I'm not really worried about this coming out later. When I'm stitching on shirts, I definitely double knot, but you can go through the loop twice or just once, and then we're going to snip off the extra end. And there's the first part. So that first thread got us that far. And then I'm going to show you just for the sake of this video, I'm going to show you how I would move on to the next section. So here's a knot again. And this time I think I better show you, I'm going to move down a little bit for the sake of time. You don't want to sit and watch me satin stitch this entire thing. My line's not very straight there. So you can start wherever. I like to start at the widest point. But I want to show you what's going to happen when you get down here to the bottom. So as you can see, we have it's called a woven wheel at the bottom that we'll be stitching later. But that is a raised stitch where we stitch mostly on top of the fabric for that one. So if this pumpkin part dips down into that flower a little bit, it's okay because we'll work that out later. I've been doing satin stitch for quite a while, so mine is probably going to be a little bit faster than yours if you're just starting out. That's okay. Just take your time because it's meant to be relaxing, focusing your mind. Okay, so when we get down here to the bottom, what I like to do, I'm going to move this down just a little bit. Bye, thanks for joining me. I'm going to come over to the side, come up again, and you can go all the way over to the other side. It's going to cut off a little bit of this flower, but I'm just going to show you, you can just go here and kind of angle this last stitch, only do a half stitch, and so it kind of leaves that open. And then I'm going to come over to the left side. And again, just over to the edge of the flower and down. And so now we have a very, very subtle rounded part, if that makes sense. I'm worried there might be a tiny gap here because of the way the flower line is down here. So I'm going to angle this and make one more tiny stitch, about 1/8 of the way across. And so now you can see it's all still really smooth, but it kind of rounds now. Okay? So you'll continue. You can work from any point down or up. Just pick up where you left off. Like if I was here, I'll come back up here. And let me show you what happens if you say you have a stitch that you feel like, I'm going to purposely make this crooked, and you're like, oh boy, I'm not happy with that. Like you see a gap, okay? You're going to take your needle off. This is why we don't tie our ends together. You're going to take your needle off of the strand, take the eye of your needle, and pull it back out. And you can do that anytime you need to fix a stitch or straighten it out. And a lot of times people ask, why don't we tie the ends together? And this is exactly why. In case you need to fix something. This gives you the freedom to do that. So that tail is going to get shorter as you go. And I'll show you how we move to a next section. Sorry, I gotta get some coffee. I didn't have enough this morning. My wake-up call this morning was before my alarm when my child told me they thought they were going to throw up. So, not a fun way to wake up. So I'm quite tired today. they didn't throw up, which is good news, and I hope that continues at school. So I'm going to just, again, for the sake of time, I'm going to move over to the next section and show you how I would go to the next section and how I would switch things on the other side. Ugh, I know. There's so many things. My kids were in school for 1 week and they came home with like horrible coughs, horrible coughs and colds. So, okay, so when I go to the next section, I'm going to angle it like this. And I'm just moving on because I don't want to bore you by finishing the entire section in satin stitch. That's something that you can finish on your time. And I will finish on my time. But I promise you, by the time I come live again, I'm probably not going to have the whole pumpkin done. Just being realistic. I've got a lot of things going on at the same time. So now you can see where the two parts start to come together. Okay. Again, you're going to get your stitches as close together as possible as you build on it, and you're also going to get as close to the line as possible. You do not have to go down in the same hole as like the stitches over here. You don't have to go down in the same place. You're going down right next to it. And my advice would be here that you want to focus more on stacking your stitches up straight on top of each other, more than paying attention to this line, more than paying attention to this row here, if that makes sense. And again, those guidelines are helping me make sure I stay slightly angled. That's the other thing. If I look at the previous row too much, I might start to straighten these out because I think it needs to match or something, and it doesn't. There will be a slight gap between your rows on the pumpkin. Don't let that get to you. It's intentional. And it has a nice effect. So here's my finished one. And you can see the lines between slightly. But it gives it more depth in making it look like each part of the pumpkin is curved. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I see people create designs where they use different colors for leaves, non-traditional colors for leaves, and I'm always like, oh, I love that. I need to do that. And I think I'm pretty literal as a person, so I have a hard time thinking outside the box, and I have a hard time thinking like, oh, let's make these leaves blue. But I love the darker color here is 924, which is one of my favorite shades. And I was like, I've got to use that for the leaves. I think it looks so nice. And it looked so much better than just using a green. So I'm happy I did that. Okay, so you would continue on like this. And then again, when you get down here, you're going to just make these shorter. Just follow this edge, and you'll only go up to the edge of the flower. Oh, snip. I'm getting another about 18-inch length of the orange. And I'm going to show you what happens when you switch over to the left side. Yep, and I have, if you don't want to get the whole kit, I do have a PDF version of this that will give you the whole booklet to follow. It'll give you the traceable design, and it'll give you like all the colors and things. Yeah, 924 is one of my favorites. It's this teal. Actually, a lot of these are favorites of mine. I use this 3858. I use a lot, especially in the fall. I love the 924. These vague, I don't know what you call these, pinkish mauve colors, dusty mauve colors are two of my favorites. And I love a dusty green. So, yeah. Okay, so when we switch over to the do all of your printable kits come with the colors? It will say in the pamphlet, like I'll have this little blurb about like, here's how you get started. Here's the materials you need. So yes, if you get the PDF version, it will have give you all the things that are in this booklet. You won't have anything mailed to you. It will only be the PDF pattern, and then you can go to the store and buy the supplies you need. And that can just be your guide. So sometimes that's a cheaper option for people instead of getting the whole kit. And then you can go pick these out yourself. Or if you already have the heat erasing pens and the needles and things like that, then you can just download this traceable design and follow my videos. So, and you can also get the oval flex hoops at the craft store too. Okay, so when you switch over to the left side, now I'm saying this as a right-handed person. I didn't do my guidelines over here. Yeah, I'm trying to have more options for PDF patterns. I'm working on that now. Most of the time I have a PDF version of each pattern I create. So it's something that you can get at a cheaper price. Then you have the traceable pattern. You just buy your own supplies. Nothing's mailed to you. You get the instant download. And then if you want to switch up the colors or you want to switch up the fabric color, you can shop for whatever fabric you like. Yeah. Angel said, sorry for all the questions. Just getting back into the craft and it's overwhelming and exciting at the same time. I get that. Yep. But it's a slow art, so take your time. It is fun. But the PDF version then you can also size it to whatever size you like. So if you get a smaller hoop or you want a round hoop or whatever, you can size the PDF to whatever size you want. So I would start if we're looking at this column, I would start on the right side and then come over to the left. And say that you start doing this and you're like, oh, I do not like coming up. Because sometimes it can be hard to come up on the same side as an area that's already been stitched. It's just hard to get it as precise. I don't know if that makes sense. These little things sticking through are the strings from my knot. So I'm just pulling them back through the other side. So if you find that you don't like coming up on the same side as an area that is already stitched, which can be a little frustrating, I'm going to show you how to switch to the other side. I like to start out there just to make sure I'm angled the right way and such. And then, oh, and I should have said earlier, don't apologize for questions because that's what I'm here for. Okay, so say I don't like coming up on the right side every time when I'm working to the left side of this pattern. So what I would do is I would go up above where I'm stitching, like just maybe a stitch or two above that. I'm going to come up on the left side now. to switch my direction. And then down on the right. You can't come up on the left and right above the last place we came down, because sometimes it'll pop right back out. So that's why I went up a little bit. And now I'm going to fill in that gap before I move on. So now I've just switched to starting on the left side, because I like coming up on this blank line instead. And I'm just filling in between. Now, one of these stitches is a little bit lumpy. If that happens to you, you can take your needle, and this is a good idea to do every once in a while with your satin stitch. If you feel like it gets lumpy, slide your needle underneath and wiggle your needle back and forth, and that will just kind of even out the strands so that they're all the same length. That also helps to create a smooth look. And now I'm going to come back above where I switched directions here and continue on. Now, I felt like that one was kind of short there. Instead of fixing it, I'm actually going to just put another stitch across. You can also do this. You don't want to pile your stitches repeatedly on top of each other, but occasionally, if you feel like there's one that's just... There we go. I think that looks better. Occasionally you can do a stitch over top of other stitches. And then you just continue up to the top, making sure your stitches are close together. It's definitely a lot easier coming up on the left side and not against a side that's already stitched. So if you ever need to switch directions, that's how you can do that. And these are just going to get shorter as you go. Shorter length of stitches. And I love stitching pumpkins like this. I mean, this part of the pattern is definitely going to take you the longest over any of the other parts. So just take your time, enjoy it. You don't have to think about this too much while you're doing it. You just relax. Put on an audiobook or some music. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And now I'm at the point where I'd rather sit and listen to an audiobook than watch TV. I'd rather just sit and stitch and listen. All right. I just realized what the time is. Time really got away from me, and I realized I've been on for 50 minutes already, and I wanted to keep the lives more close to about 20 minutes. So hopefully this recorded all of it, and I can upload this to YouTube as well. But thanks for joining me. You're just going to continue to go up to the top and the bottom of each section, and work on these 3 panels for our first part. You can also do my piece of advice for these is to angle these. So we're angling these like this, and then these I kind of angled like this. These I did back. That might look kind of funny when you're just looking at it like this, but that's how I angled them. Hi, Georgia. So work on those parts. When we get to these where we're overlapped, I mean, you can start on these top parts. I'll probably do a short live where I talk about going around these areas. Mostly, I mean, we have our pattern and our picture to refer back to. We mostly only need to know where this middle line is, right here. So when you satin stitch over here, you can go, it's okay to cover the leaves for now. You're going to go up to the stem and just stop at the stem, start on the other side, and just work up to the stem. Here, these are going to be really little stitches that go right up to the leaf here. But when I first stitched this, I only stitched up to the middle, and then when I did my leaves, I'll show you later how we figure out where to do our leaves, and we'll do them over top of the satin stitch. So just work up to the stem, and same here with the leaves. Okay, so this is where you can work on your satin stitch for the pumpkin. And then let me know either on YouTube or on here if you have questions or difficulties when you get to those spots, and I'll cover them in follow-up lives. But happy stitching, and I hope you have fun with this. Sorry, this looks a little crazy over here. It's just because I went over it too many times. So this is actually an eraser. But heat can also, if you mess up with your transfer, you can erase that with heat. Or you can take, like, heat up, you can get a spoon hot by dipping it in, like, boiling water or something, and just press a spoon to that if you're trying to get just one tiny part erased or fix it. Anyway, let me know if you have questions. The main part that's going to take the longest is this satin stitch the whole way around, and then I will schedule my next live and post that on Instagram so you know when to catch me the next time, and I hope that you have fun with this. Thanks for joining me.